सबसे पहले स्टार्ट करने से पहले चैप्टर सबसे पहले मैं बताना चाहूँगा कि इस चैनल पे मैं अपने दो तीन टाइप के कंटेंट डालने की कोशिश करने वाला हूँ। एक तो मेरा नॉर्मल व्लॉग कंटेंट, ट्रैवल व्लॉग, जब भी मैं अपने दोस्तों के साथ कहीं बाहर ऐसा पर्टिकुलरली प्लान करके या फिर अनप्लान भी कहीं घूमने जाता हूँ तो मैं उसको एज अ ट्रैवल व्लॉग बना के डालने की कोशिश करूँगा। एंड अदर थिंग इज़ कि मैं ऐसे वाले कंटेंट डालने वाला हूँ जो रिएक्शन कंटेंट एक तरीके से हो सकते हैं, वेब नॉवेल्स एंड मानवास मांगास भी इन फ्यूचर देखेंगे, कोई वीडियोस वगैरह भी देखेंगे, पर मेरा मेन फोकस वेब नॉवेल्स पे ही होने वाला है। एंड इस वेब नॉवेल्स को लेके मैं सोच रहा था कि अगर मैं शैडो स्लेव की एक, क्योंकि मैं तो बहुत आगे हूँ, ऑलमोस्ट 2950 चैप्टर लेटेस्ट जितना भी मुझे मिला, तो मैं वो चैप्टर पढ़ रहा हूँ। सो मैं सोच रहा हूँ वहाँ तक एक अब्रिज्ड वर्जन, कुछ दो तीन वीडियोस या चार पांच वीडियोस बना के आप लोगों में अप टू डेट कर सकूँ, जिसको ऐसा ऐसा रिविजन देखना है। आई विल से कि भाई तुम वेब नॉवल खुद पढ़ो तो तुम्हें ज़्यादा अच्छा लगेगा। अनदर थिंग इज़ कि मैं तीसरा कंटेंट डालने वाला हूँ जो कि एक थोड़ा लाइफस्टाइल कंटेंट होने वाला है, जिसके बारे में मैं एक फुल्ली अलग वीडियो बना के निकालूंगा। एंड टू सब्सक्राइब दिस चैनल, एंड भाई जो लोग इसको एज अ वीडियो फॉर्मेट देख रहे हैं, क्योंकि वीडियो फॉर्मेट में व्यूज़ ज़्यादा आते हैं, तो जो लोग इसको वीडियो फॉर्मेट में देख रहे हैं उनको मैं कहना चाहता हूँ कि भाई सब्सक्राइब कर लो, क्योंकि आप लाइव भी आके दे सकते हो और लाइव में आप मेरे से चैट वैट भी कर सकते हो। मुझे, हाँ, मैं आपका हर एक मैसेज का रिप्लाई कर सकता हूँ, मैं आप हर एक मैसेज का रिप्लाई करूँगा। तो कभी आओ यार, लाइव में चिल करेंगे, ठीक है, साथ में चिल करेंगे बैठ के, एंड अनदर चीज़ रिएक्शंस वगैरह करेंगे। मैं एक डिस्कॉर्ड सर्वर भी बना रहा हूँ, उसकी भी जल्द ही आपको मैं लिंक प्रोवाइड कर दूंगा, उसमें आप ज्वाइन करो एंड वी कैन शेयर artworks, we can discuss lore, we can power scale things and do those kind of stuff. So without further ado, uh, start करते हैं अपना chapter 3, which is named Melissa. एज आई रिमेम्बर, मलिसा हमारी छोटी बहन का नाम था। आई मीन हमारे जो मेन कैरेक्टर जो मंगूरी, या फिर उसका जो नाम था क्लाइन मोरेटी, उसकी छोटी बहन का नाम मलिसा था। सो वी विल स्टार्ट एट दैट। आफ्टर कंफर्मिंग हिज प्लान, जो मिंग्रुई, इस लाइफ के बाद मैं इसका प्रोनाउंसिएशन देख के आऊँगा और अच्छे से प्रैक्टिस करके आने वाला हूँ। After confirming his plans, Minguri immediately felt he had a mental crutch. His fear and unease were all swept away into a corner of his mind. Only then he had the mood to carefully study Klein's memory fragments. Munguri habitually stood up before turning off the pipe's valve. He watched the wall lamp gradually dim until its flame extinguished before sitting back down. As he subconsciously fiddled with the revolver's brass cylinder, he pressed the side of his head. He slowly recalled his memories in the crimson dyed darkness as though he was the most attentive viewer in a movie theater. Perhaps as a result, having a bullet pass through his head, Klein's memories were like shattered glass. Not only were the memories not contiguous, there were many spots that were clearly missing. For example, memories pertaining to how the execute revolver appeared in his possession, whether he had committed suicide or was killed, as well as the meaning of the words "everyone will die, including me" on the notebook, or whether he had participated in anything odd 2 days before the incident. Not only had these particular memories become fragmented, they were also missing pieces. It was the same. It was the same even for knowledge he ought to know. In light of the present situation, Zhou Mingrui, Grui, Zhou Mingrui believed that if Klein were to return to university, it was unlikely he could graduate. This was despite him having left campus just days ago without relaxing one bit. He needs to participate in the Tengan University's history department interview 2 days later. The university graduates of Leon Kingdom do not have the tradition of staying at their alma mater. His mentor had given him a recommendation letter for Tingen University and Brackland University. Although the window, although sorry, मैं गलत पढ़ लेता हूँ भाई. Though the windows Imunguri silently observed the red moon setting in the west, the gradual sinking of the moon continued until faint light glowed from the east, dyeing the horizon golden. At the moment, there was a commotion inside the apartment. Soon, the sound of footsteps approached his door. Melissa is awake. She really as she's really as punctual as always. Jiminguri smiled due to Klein's memories. Seeing Melissa made him feel as though she was really his younger sister. However, I do not have a younger sister. He immediately contradicted himself. Melissa was different from Benson and Klein. Her rudimentary education was not completed at the Sunday school classes offered by the Church of Evernight. When she reached schooling age, the Leon Kingdom had enacted the Basic Education Law. A primary and secondary education committee was established and was specially provided with funding, increasing the kingdom's investment into education. Nice यार, हर जगह होना चाहिए. And many जगह पे ये नहीं होता है भाई. नहीं बात करते इस चीज़ पे तो भाई बहुत जगह पे ये नहीं होता है. In less than 3 years, under the premise that numerous church schools would be incorporated, many public primary schools were established to strictly maintain the principle of religious neutrality. This was to prevent education from involving itself in the conflicts between the Lord of Storms, Evernight Goddess, and the God of Steam and Machinery. हाँ, मतलब ये गॉड्स के मतलब टाइटल्स है. लॉर्ड ऑफ स्टॉर्म्स एक गॉड है जिसका कोई चर्च होगा, एंड एवरनाइट गॉडेस एंड गॉड ऑफ स्टीम एंड मशीनरी. वैसे मैं सही बताऊँ ना तो पहली बार मैं ऐसे टाइटल्स देख रहा हूँ कि यूजुअली गॉड्स को हम सन से एसोसिएट करते हैं. सन गॉड मैंने बहुत सारी सीरीज में देखा है. पहली बार मैं ऐसा देख रहा हूँ गॉड ऑफ स्टीम एंड मशीनरी एंड गॉड ऑफ लॉर्ड ऑफ स्टॉर्म्स. एवरनाइट गॉडेस मैंने पहले कभी नहीं सुना इससे पहले. आगे चलते हैं. Compared to Sunday school that only cost a copper penny a week, a public primary school's cost of 3 pence a week appeared rather expensive. However, the former only provided education every Sunday, whereas the latter provided 6 days of classes a week. In conclusion, the price was so low that it was almost free. Melissa was different from most girls. From a young age, she enjoyed things like gears, springs, and bearings. Her ambition was to be a steam mechanic. Having suffered from a lack of culture, Benson, who knew the importance of education, supported his sister's dreams just like how he supported Klein's university education. After all, Tengen Technical School was only considered secondary education. There was no need for her to attend grammar school or a public school for more knowledge. Looks like भाई मलिसा एक स्मार्ट लड़की है, बहुत ही स्मार्ट I would say. In July last year, 15-year-old Melissa passed her entrance examinations and fulfilled her dreams of becoming a student at the Tingen Technical School's Steam and Machinery Department. As such, her weekly school fees were raised to 9 pence. Meanwhile, Benson's company was affected by the situation in the southern continent. That was a drastic drop both in profit and business transactions. More than a third of the employees were retrenched in order to keep his job and maintain his livelihood. Benson could only accept more arduous tasks. He had to work overtime more frequently or head to places with harsh environments. That was what he was occupied with the past few days. It was not that Klein did not think of helping share his elder brother's burden, but being born a commoner and having been admitted into an average grammar school, he felt a strong sense of inadequacy and when he enrolled into university, for example, as the origin of all languages in the northern continent, the ancient language of Fesak was something all the children of nobles of the wealthy class would learn from a young age. In contrast, he only made first contact with it in the university. He faced many similar aspects during his schooling career. Client nearly gave his all and often stayed up late into the night and woke up early before barely managing to catch up to the others, eventually allowing him to graduate with average results. Memories regarding his elder brother and younger sister remained active in Zumunguri's mind until he turned the doorknob open. Only then did he jolt awake and remember that he held a revolver in his hand. This was a semi-regulated item. It will scare children. Also, there's still the wound on my head. With Melissa arriving at any moment, Zumunguri pressed onto his temples and hurriedly pulled a desk drawers and threw the revolver in before slamming it close. What happened? Melissa looked over curiously when she heard the commotion. She was still in the prime of her youth, even though she didn't have much nutritious food to eat, making her face thin and slightly pale. सॉरी मैंने माइक पे अभी हाथ रख दिया गलती से अगर ऑडियो में कोई दिक्कत आ रही हो तो एंड शैडो पड़ रहा है यार मेरे को थोड़ा ध्यान देना पड़ेगा इन चीज़ों पे बहुत लेट्स कंटिन्यू सो कहाँ पे थे हम यस स्ट्रीम चल रही Yes, primer of a youth, even though she didn't have much nutritious food to eat, making her face thin and slightly pale. Her skin remained lustrous as it executed the vibe of a young girl. When Zumunguri saw his sister's brown eyes look over, he forcefully composed himself and picked up an item beside his hand before calmly closing the drawer. Sorry. To conceal the existence of the revolver, he placed his other hand on his temple, the texture confirming that his wound had already healed. He took out a silver wine leaf pocket watch and pressed the top gently, causing it to cover the flip open, causing its cover to flip open. It was a picture of the sibling's father. It was the most valuable item the Imperial Army's sergeant left behind, but being a second-hand item, it would often malfunction from time to time. In recent years, even though he had gotten a watchsmith to fix it, it had embarrassed Benson, who enjoyed bringing it with him to elevate his status many a times. So it was thrown away back at home in the end. It had to be said that perhaps Melissa did have talent in machinery. After grasping the principles behind the watch, she borrowed the tools from her technical school to fiddle with the pocket watch. Recently, she even claimed to have fixed it. Zumunguri looked at the watch open cover and saw that the second hand was not moving. Subconsciously, he twisted the top dial to wind the pocket watch. I suddenly realized कि भाई तुमको म्यूजिक की आवाज़ नहीं आ रही होगी मैंने बहुत ज़्यादा लो कर रखी है इतनी तो इतनी तो रखनी चाहिए यार बहुत लो कर रखी थी मैंने यार तुम पता ही नहीं था कि तुम्हें आवाज़ नहीं आ रही है ओके did have talent in machinery after grasping the principles behind you okay ये पढ़ लेता so Zumunguri looked at the watch open cover and saw that second hand was not moving. Subconsciously, he touched the top dial to wind the pocket watch. However, despite winding it a few times, he did not hear the sound of taut springs. The second hand remained motionless. It looks like it's broken again. He looked at his sister while trying to find a topic of conversation. नेटवर्क इशू फिर आ गया यार दिक्कत है भाई देखते हैं फिक्स करेंगे अगली स्ट्रीम तक The second hand remained motionless. Looked like top of Marisha shot him an expressionless glance and briskly walked over to take the pocket watch away. She stood in her spot and pulled up the bottom, sitting atop the pocket watch with a few simple turns. The tick-tocking of the second hand sounded Isn't pulling the button up usually meant to adjust the time? Zimunguri's expression immediately turned blank. At that moment, a bell chimed away from a faraway cathedral. It chimed 6 times, sounding distant and eternal. I certainly had to listen to it and pulled the button up once again. Following that, she tuned it to synchronize that time. It's okay now, she said, simply without emotion. She then pressed the top button back and handed the pocket watch back to Zomunguri. Zominguri returned a smile politely in embarrassment. Melissa gave her older brother a piercing stare before turning to walk to the cupboard. She took her toiletries and towel before opening the door to leave. She headed for the public bathroom. Why did her expression have a look of disparagement? भाई साहब जो वर्ड्स मैं पहली बार पढ़ रहा हूँ जिंदगी में. Disparagement and resignation. It is a look of love and concern for a retarded retarded brother. Yuri lowered his head and chuckled. He closed the pocket watch over with a click before opening it again. He repeated his action as his ideal thoughts focused on a question. Client committed suicide without a silencer. Well, I will have considered it as suicide for now. His suicide should have caused quite a commotion, yet Melissa, who was just a wall away, did not notice it at all. Was she sleeping too soundly, or is kind suicide shrouded in mystery to begin with? Click. The pocket watch opened. Clack. The pocket watch closed. Melissa returned from washing up and saw her brother's subconscious act of constantly opening and closing pocket watches. Her gaze was once again glazed with exasperation as she said with sweet voice, "Client, take out all the remaining bread. Remember to buy fresh ones today. There's meat and peas too. Your interview is soon. I will make you mutton stewed with peas." As soon as she spoke, she moved a stove out from a corner with some charcoal. She boiled a pot of hot water. Before the water boiled, she opened the cupboard's lowest drawer. It took out what seems like a treasure, a can of inferior tea leaves. She threw about 10 leaves into the pot and pretended that it was real tea. Melissa poured 2 big cups of tea as she shared 2 pieces of rye bread with Jamunguri over tea. There is no sawdust or excessive gluten mixed in, but it is unappetizing. Jamunguri still felt weak and was starving. He forced himself to swallow the bread with the tea while complaining inwardly. Melissa finished eating a few minutes later after she adjusted her black hair that reached down to her waist. She looked at Zhu Mingrui and said, "Remember to buy fresh bread. All we need is 8 pounds. The weather is hot, so the bread will easily spoil. Also, buy the mutton peas. Remember to buy them." Indeed, she was showing concern for her dull brother. She even had to repeat to emphasize it another time. Zhu Mingrui nodded with a smile. All right. Regarding the Leon Kingdom's pound, Zumgrui matched Klein's muscle memory with his. He believed it was close to half a kilogram, and what he was accustomed to. Melissa did not say anything further. She stood up and tidied the area after packing away the last bit of bread for lunch. She put on a tattered cap that their mother left behind, picked up a swan bag used to carry her books and stationeries, and prepared to leave. It was not Sunday, so she had an entire day of classes to attend. Walking from their apartment to Tingan Technical School took about 15 minutes. There were public horse carriages that cost a penny a kilometer with a limit of 4 pence in the city and 6 pence in the city outskirts. In order to save money, Melissa would leave ahead of time and walk to school. Moments after she opened the main door, she paused in her footsteps and turned her body halfway, saying, "Client, don't buy too much mutton or peas. Benson might come back on Sunday. Oh, and remember, we only need 8 pounds of bread." "All right, sure thing," answered Zhu Mingrui in exasperation. Simultaneously, he repeated the words Sunday a few times in his head. In the northern continent, a year was similarly split into 12 months. Every year there was 365 or 366 days. A week was similarly split into 7 days. The splitting of months was as a result of astronomical observations. It made Zhu suspect whether he was in a parallel universe. As for the splitting of days, it was a result of religion. This was because the northern continent had 7 orthodox gods: the eternal blazing sun. Oh, sun wala god आ गया. द लॉर्ड ऑफ स्टॉर्म्स, द गॉड ऑफ नॉलेज एंड विजडम. मैंने इसके बारे में भी सुना है, मतलब इस सीरीज से नहीं, इस जॉनर से नहीं, बट मैंने बाकी कहीं पे भी मानवा और बाकी नॉवेल्स एंड एनिमेस वगैरह थे, इसमें गॉड ऑफ नॉलेज एंड विजडम होते हैं. द एवनाइट गॉडेस, अर्थ मदर एंड द गॉड ऑफ कॉम्बैट, गॉड ऑफ कॉम्बैट एंड द गॉड ऑफ स्टीम एंड मशीनरी. Watching his sister close the door and leave, Zhumgrui suddenly sighed. Soon his thoughts focused on the luck enchantment ritual. "Sorry, I really wish to return home." बहुत सारा लो ड्रॉप हुआ है अभी. थैंकफुली स्ट्रीम चल रही है, दिक्कत नहीं थी. एंड बहुत सारा लो ड्रॉप हुआ है अभी हम पे. एंड हमको पता चला है कि क्लाइंट की सिचुएशंस क्या है, उसके हालात वगैरह क्या हैं. एंड मलिसा जो क्लाइंट की छोटी बहन है, उसकी सिचुएशंस क्या है, वो कहाँ पढ़ती है, ये वगैरह वगैरह. ये पता चला है कि भाई 7 गॉड्स हैं, इसलिए 7 दिन हैं. एंड एस्ट्रोनॉमिकल जो स्टार्स का सिस्टम है, उससे हमको 12 मंथ्स वगैरह मिले. नॉर्मल नॉर्मल चीज़ें हैं अभी तक, तो कुछ स्पेशल कुछ खास हुआ नहीं, बट मुझे लग रहा है कुछ खास होने वाला है. एज द नेक्स्ट चैप्टर इज नेम डिविनेशन. सो देखते क्या खास होने वाला है. एंड बिफोर दैट जस्ट अ बिट ऑफ ब्रेक. अरे यार, ये रिकॉर्डिंग पॉज नहीं होती क्या? मैं चेक करने वाला था कि भाई स्ट्रीम में कोई दिक्कत तो नहीं आ रही, बट आई थिंक कोई दिक्कत नहीं आ रही है. एंड रिज्यूम करते हैं. बड़े बड़े चैप्टर है इसके, 25-25 मिनट. Chapter 4, Divination. Returning to his chair, he heard the... Oh, अपडेट करना भूल गया मैं. अपडेट करता है फटाफट पहले. Chapter 4, Divination. Returning to his chair, he heard the faraway cathedral's bells chime again. It continued 7 times before Zhuanggrui slowly stood up. He went up front to the cupboard and took out his clothes: a black vest with a matching suit, trousers that clung tightly to his legs, a half-topped hat, and his faint, scholarly air made Zhuanggrui felt like he was watching an English drama set in the Victorian era. He suddenly muttered softly as he shook his head with a weary smile. "I'm not going for an interview. All I am doing is buying some ingredients to prepare for my luck enchantment ritual." Klein was so concerned about his impending interview that it became instinct. When he was not focused enough, he habitually wore his only decent set of clothing. After taking a breath, Zhu Grui took off his suit and vest, switching to a brownish yellow coat. He also changed to a felt hat with a rounded edge of the same color. With his outfit done, he walked to the side of the bed and lifted a square cushion. He reached his hand into an inconspicuous hole beneath and rummaged around before finding an intermediate layer. बहुत ही डिटेल में हमें बताया जा रहा है क्या वो है. ड्रेस कोड्स वगैरह इनके जो हैं, जो कि आई अप्रिशिएट एंड आई डोंट रियली केयर। भाई कपड़ों के ऊपर उन्होंने भाई 3 3 पैराग्राफ लिखे हुए हैं। वर्ल्ड बिल्डिंग मतलब बहुत डिटेल्ड है, बहुत डिटेल्ड है, फॉर माई लाइक्स तो बहुत ज़्यादा ही डिटेल्ड है। सो कहा था, हाँ, when he retraced his right hand, there was a roll of notes in his palm. There was about 8 notes with fast dark green colors. These were all the savings Benson had at the moment. It even included the living expense for the next 3 days. Two of them were 5 solely notes, and the remaining were 1 solely notes. In Leon Kingdom currency system, solely was ranked second. It originated from ancient silver coins. 1 solely was equivalent to 12 copper pence. They had denominations of 1 and 5 solely. And the top of the currency system was the gold pound. They were also paper based but were guaranteed by gold and pegged directly. A gold pound was equivalent to 20 soldi. They had denominations of 1, 5, and 10 gold pounds. Zhu Ngui spread a note and caught a whiff of the faint unique ink. This was the smell of money, perhaps a result of Line's memories fragments or his constant desire for money. Zhu Ngui, Ngui, जो भी नाम है भाई, मेरे को रियली देखना पड़ेगा क्या है. Felt like he had instantly fallen in love with these notes. Behold, their design are so beautiful. It makes the stern and old-fashioned George III and his 2 mustaches appear especially adorable. Behold the watermark that can be seen when the note is placed against sunlight. It is so alluring. The exquisite design for the anti-counterfeit label makes it completely different from those fake fancy schlocks. Zhu admitted it for nearly admired it nearly for a minute before pulling out 2 1 solid notes. He then rolled up the remaining notes and stuffed them back into the cushion concealed layer. After arranging and flattening the clothes around the hole, Zhou Mingrui folded the 2 notes he had taken from out neatly and placed them into the left pocket of his brownish yellow jacket. He separated the notes from the few pence he had in the trouser pocket. With all this done, he placed a key into his right pocket and brought a dark brownish paper bag along with him, and quickly walked towards the door. His shuffling footsteps slowed down from a brisk pace until it eventually stopped. Jimmy stood by the door and was unsure when he had already begun to frown. Klein's suicide was fraught with peculiarities. Would he encounter any accidents if he were to leave just like that? After some deep thought, Zimingui returned to his desk, pulled open the drawer. He then took out the shimmering brass revolver. This was the only defensive weapon he could think of, and it was the only weapon with sufficient power. Although he had never participated shooting, just pulling such a revolver out would definitely daunt anyone. He cased the revolver's cold metal before stuffing his revolver into the pocket where his notes were. He clasped the money in his palm as his fingers pressed onto the gun's handle. It was perfectly concealed. Feeling secure, he who knew a little of everything suddenly had a worry. Why would I end up misfiring? Being deluged with such a thought, Zimingri quickly thought of a solution. He drew the revolver and greased the cylinder, then aligned the empty chamber, which was a result of the suicide, along the gun's hammer before closing it. This was Even if there was a misfire, he would discharge an empty round. After stuffing his revolver back into his pocket, Zimingui kept his left hand there. He pressed down on his hat with his right hand and pulled open the door before leaving. The corridor during the corridor during the day remained dim as limited sunlight shone in from the window situated at the end of the corridor. Zhu Mingrui quickly went down the stairs and left the apartment before taking in the brilliance and warmth of the sun. Finally, 3.5 चैप्टर्स के बाद हम अपार्टमेंट या वो स्पेशल रूम से बाहर निकले हैं. अभी हम देखेंगे वर्ल्ड व्यू क्या है, यहाँ बाहर की दुनिया में क्या चल रहा है. Although it was almost June, it was still considered the middle of summer. However, Tingen was situated north of the Leon Kingdom, so it had unique climate characteristics. The highest annual temperature was not even 30 degrees Celsius on Earth, with even cooler mornings. However, the streets were awfully awash with filthy water and stone junk. From clients' memories, this was not a rare sight in low-income communities, even if there were sewers. After all, there were just too many people, and people needed to survive. मेरा इंटरनेट बहुत ख़राब चल रहा है भाई. फ़िलहाल तो भाई बहुत ही डिले के साथ चल रहा है. बट लेट्स ब्रेव दिस टुडे एंड विल सी टुमारो. Good morning. However, the streets were okay. Come on, come and try our delicious roasted fish, hot and fresh oyster soup. Drink a bowl in the morning and feel invigorated all day. Fresh fish from the pot for just 5 pence a piece. Muffins and eel soup make the perfect combination. Conch, crunch, conch, conch. What the fuck is that? Vegetables freshly plucked from the farms outside the city, cheap and fresh, and many more. The mobile hawkers who sold veg, अच्छा जो मतलब इंडियन टर्म्स में ठेले वाले. The mobile hawkers who sold vegetables, fruits, and hot food shouted along the streets as they beckoned the rushing pedestrians. Some of them would stop and carefully compare when before purchasing. Others would impatiently wave their hand as they had yet to find work for the day. Zhu Mingrui took in a whiff of air that mixed both noxious and fragrant aromas. As he clenched the revolver tightly in his left hand, which held the notes tight, he pressed down on his head with his right hand while passing through the busy street with a tiny slouch. There were bound to be thieves in populated areas. Furthermore, the street had no lack of poor citizens who were working part-time after losing their previous job. There was also starving children that were exploited by adults to do their bidding. He proceeded forward until he reached a point where the crowdness around him restored to normal. He straightened his back and raised his head to look down the street. There was a vagrant accordionish busking. The melody was sometimes pleasant, sometimes fervent. Beside him were several children in ragged clothes with shallow complexions due to malnourishment. They listened to the music and moved to the beat, dancing self-made choreographies. Their faces were filled with joy as though they were a prince or an angel. A deadpan woman passed by. Her skirt was dirty and her skin was dull. Her gaze appeared dull and sluggish. Only when she looked at the bunch of children did a faint glow flash. It was as though she had seen herself from 3 decades ago. Xu Mingrui took over her and turned into another street before stopping at Smirin Bakery. The owner of the bakery was a 70-plus-year-old granny named Wendy Semrin. Her hair was completely grayish white and she always wore a genial smile. इंटरनेट बहुत ख़राब है भाई मेरा, बहुत ख़राब है. Let's leave it at that. कहाँ थे हम? Yes. She always wore a genial smile. From the beginning of client's memories, she had been here selling bread and pastries. Oh, the Tingen biscuits and lemon cakes. The sea bakes are very delicious. Jim Ingrid gulped a mouthful of saliva and smiled. Miss Smirrin, 8 pounds of rye bread. Oh dear Klein, where's Benson? Is he not back? Wendy asked meaningly. In a few more days, answered Zumingri vaguely. As Wendy took the rye bread, she sighed. As Wendy took the rye bread, she sighed. He sure is hard-working lad. He will have a good wife. Upon saying this, the corner of her lips curled up as she said playfully, "All is good now. You have already graduated. You are a history graduate of our co-university. You will soon be able to earn money. You should not be staying in the apartment you are currently living in. At the very least, you should have a bathroom you can call your own. Miss Min, you should be a young and energetic woman today." All Zumingri could do was respond with a dry smile. If Klein was to successfully pass his interview and become a lecturer at Tingen University, it was true that his family would immediately be pushed up to a higher socioeconomic status. In his memory fragments, he had once fantasized about renting a detached house in the suburbs. Upstairs, there would be 5 or 6 rooms, 2 bathrooms, and a huge balcony on the first floor. There would be 2 rooms, a dining room, a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom. It would also come with an underground storage room. This was not a wishful dream. Even a lecturer on probation at Tingen University would have a weekly salary of 2 gold pounds. After the probationary period, the salary would be raised to 3 gold pounds and 10 soldi. One had to know the desire working for so many years. Klein's brother Benson only had a weekly salary of £1 and 10 solis. Ordinary workers at the factory don't even get a pound, or at best a little more. And rent for a bungalow was about 19 solis to £1 and 18 solis. This is the difference between earning 3 to 4,000 yuan and earning 14 to 15,000 yuan a month. Zimingri muttered to himself. However, all this was under the premise that he passed either the Teng University or Beckland University interviews. There was not many other opportunities. People without any concern were unable to get recommendations to become a public servant, and those who studied history were more limited in job opportunities. There were not much demand for private consultants from the aristocracies, banks, or industrial magnates. Taking into account that the knowledge of client grasp was fragmented and incomplete, Jimmy felt awkward and guilty towards Miss Mirren's expectations of him. "No, I have always been this young," answered Wendy humorously. As she spoke, she packed the 16 rye bread she had weighted into the brown paper bag that Ziminguri had brought. She stretched out her hands and said, "Ninepence." Every rye bread weighted about half a pound, as difference was inevitable. Ninepence wasn't it 11 pence 2 days ago? Ziminguri asked subconsciously. It cost 15 pence the month before the previous month. "You have to thank the people who protested on the streets for repeal of the Grain Act," said Wendy as they struggled. Zimingri nodded in vague acknowledgement. Klein's memory regarding to this were incomplete. All he remembered was that the core tenet of the Grain Act was to protect prices of domestic agriculture products before the prices rose to a certain level. Again, imports from southern nations like Frene, Potter, Massin, Lindbergh were stopped. Why would people protest the act? Without saying much, Zumingri, afraid he would end up pulling out the revolver, carefully took out his notes and handed one of them over to Miss Smirrin. He was giving 3 copper pence in charge. Stuffing them into his trousers pockets, he took the paper bag containing the bread and headed for the lettuce and meat market across the street. He was working hard for mutton stew with peas his sister had extorted. There was a municipal square at the intersection of Iron Cross Street and Dill Street. Many tents were erected erected there, and clowns dressing in odd and funny attire were distributing flyers. There's a circus performance tomorrow night. Jimmy glanced at the flyers in the hand of others as he read his contents under his breath. Melissa would definitely like it. However, how much is the entrance fee? With that thought, Jimmy went closer. Just as he was about to ask a clown with a red and yellow painted face, a hoarse woman's voice sounded from beside him. Would you like to try a divination? Zwingli subconsciously turned his head and saw a woman wearing a pointed hat and a long black dress standing in front of a short tent. Her face was smeared with red and yellow paint, and her eyes were a profound grayish blue. No, Zwingli shook his head in response. He did not have the spare cash for divination. The woman laughed and said, "My tarot divination is very accurate." Tarot. Zwingli was instantly dumbfounded. His pronunciation was almost identical to the tarot cards on Earth. And tarot cards from Earth were a set of cards used for divination. They just had graphics that represented different omens. Wait, he suddenly recalled the origins of tarot divination in this world. It did not originate from the seven Orthodox gods, nor was it an ancient legacy. Instead, it was created by the Intis Republic's Council of the era, Roosevelt Gustav, more than 170 years ago. Mr. Roosevelt invented the steam engine, improved the sailing boat, overthrew the Intis Kingdom's imperial rule, and was recognized by the god of craftsmanship. He also became the first consul of the Intis Republic. Later, he invaded other nations and placed Lindbergh and other nations under his protection. He made the Leon Kingdom, Freyne Potter, Fesek Empire, and other powerful northern continent nations bow down to the Intis Republic. Following that, Republic was then changed to an empire, and he became the self-proclaimed Emperor Caesar. It was during Roosevelt's rule that the Church of Craftsmanship received its first public holy revelation since the Fifth Epoch. Ever since, the god of craftsmanship was changed to the god of steam and machinery. Roosevelt also invented tarot divination. He also established the contemporary system of paper-based cards and their play styles. There was many familiar styles that Zwingli was familiar with, such as Upgrade, Fighting the Landlord, Texas Poker, and Quint. In addition, the Marine Fleet Sea sent out discovered a sea route that led to the southern continent through the storm and turbulent seas. This also began the era of colonialism. Unfortunately, he was betrayed in his old age in the year 1198 of the Fifth Epoch. He was assassinated by the combined forces of the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun, the former Interferoid family, the Sauron family, and other aristocrats. He eventually died in the White Maple Palace. White too. To recall such a general knowledge suddenly made him face palm. Could this be a transmigration senior? With this in mind, Zwingli was intrigued to see what tarot cards looked like. Therefore, he nodded at the pointy-headed woman with the painted face and said, "If the price is reasonable, I will give it a try." The woman immediately said with a laugh, "Sir, you are the first one here today, so it's on the house." दोस्तों, ये एक और बड़ा चैप्टर खत्म करने के बाद हमको पता चला है कि भाई इससे पहले भी कोई आ चुका है, मतलब ये फर्स्ट पर्सन नहीं है इस वर्ल्ड में। एंड इससे पहले भी कोई आके यहाँ पे हरकतें करके जा चुका है, मतलब किंग बन गया भाई वो अपने पास्ट वर्ल्ड एक्सपीरियंसेस से। उसने स्टीम इंजन और ये सब का प्रयोग किया, उसने कार्ड्स यहाँ पे इंट्रोड्यूस कराए, बहुत कुछ किया उसने। एंड एज अ टिपिकल शोनेन प्रोटैगनिस्ट भी कह सकते हैं, जो इससे का एक ट्रोप होता है, तो वैसा कुछ किया इसने भाई। और देखते हैं यार इसके बारे में, शायद जैसे ये वैसा वाला कैरेक्टर होगा ना जो जिसके तुम लेजेंड्स फॉलो करके क्लूज लोगे कि भाई अरे उसने ऐसा किया था तो भाई मैं कैसा करूं, एक बार सेट किया होगा इसने। सो आई थिंक ये ऐसा कैरेक्टर है। एंड बहुत ही प्यारा चैप्टर, बहुत ही प्यारा चैप्टर है। मुझे बस अपनी स्ट्रीम को थोड़ा देखना पड़ेगा कि मेरा स्टार्टिंग में नेटवर्क अच्छा आता है, बाद में बहुत ख़राब हो जाता है, तो आई हैव टू फिक्स दैट। बट आज के लिए ये स्ट्रीम इतना ही था। Thank you guys for watching the stream till the end, and I will see you tomorrow on the next stream. And और बहुत ही जल्दी मैं एक ना टेबल या टाइम टेबल ऐसे सेट कर दूंगा कि मैं कब कब स्ट्रीम करता हूँ, कब कब आप आ सकते हो, आपके लिए थोड़ा इजी होगा। एंड अनदर थिंग कि सब्सक्राइब कर दो चैनल को, उससे आपको ऑटोमेटिकली पता चल जाएगा जब मैं स्ट्रीम करता हूँ, एंड आपको वीडियोस देखने को मिलेंगी, बहुत अच्छी अच्छी वीडियोस। सो थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग, सी यू नेक्स्ट टाइम।